Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today's topic is whether or not America is an exceptional nation.
I think that America certainly has a reputation for being an exceptional nation due to the principles in its founding documents, which strive to protect the rights and freedoms of their citizens.
Honestly, when looking at the ideals and impact of America, it's very hard not to say that it's extraordinary. But also, when considering America's historical and contemporary treatment of its own citizens, it can only be seen as a failure of its own principles.
America's remarkability certainly shines in President Wilson's second inaugural speech, where he argued that America must join World War I to defend the principles of freedom and equality.
Also, he makes pretty good use of motif, ethos, and logos to convince the audience.
Yeah, like he uses motif to show what America fights for. Specifically, that they believe in fair dealing, justice, the freedom to live, and to be at ease against organized wrong. By making it a motif, he appeals to the ethos of the American people throughout the speech, and the fact that it works shows how they really do believe in these ideals.
Also, I think that by appealing to ethos, he creates an ideological reason that justifies going to war and garners wide public support.
Another motif that I think is worth mentioning is the idea that the nation should stand firm and stand together to support the rights of and freedoms of mankind. This serves to emphasize how united America is due to their shared beliefs.
By looking at these two motifs together, Wilson implies that America is a nation which sees itself as the protector of rights and acts on said belief, which makes it pretty exceptional.
He also lists what America wants the world to do, starting with the idea that all nations are responsible for peace and political stability, and continues with a similar syntax when stating the other goals the world should aim for. He makes use of parallelism to emphasize the importance of each principle which America demands of all countries.
If you really think about it, America's impact is massive since what was once considered American principles is now considered universal.
These principles are the ones enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, which was made during another time when America fought for the natural rights of people. These include the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which, along with the explicit assertion that a government's power comes from the consent of the people, makes America extraordinary then and now.
Although the things we previously talked about are all true, it is important to discuss the flaws of America, specifically looking at how America has and is treating its own citizens.
Yeah, like the New York Times article, The America We Need talks about how even the promise of democracy is unfulfilled as extremely wealthy hold far too much political power in America, shaping the policies passed with their interests in mind. In such a situation, people do not have the full freedom and power they were promised. And if the power imbalance were to get more extreme, America would essentially become a failed democracy.
Of course, we can't forget to mention America's biggest failure to uphold human rights, slavery. The fact that slavery and later segregation plagued America since its beginnings and continues to do so throughout its development cannot be ignored.
Even with the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, where America took multiple steps forward in equality for all races, racism was still prevalent. For example, Black people had fewer opportunities available and frequently faced violence.
If you just look at the stories set in that time period, like Fences, a play set in the 1950s following a poor Black family, the racism of the time and its impacts are clearly displayed. An example of this from the story is that Troy, a talented baseball player, was unable to advance in his career due to racism at the time.
Yeah, Troy's situation makes it clear that despite America's theoretical equal opportunity for success, people are affected by who they were born as. This inequality can also be seen in Troy's poverty and the poverty of those around him, which shows that discrimination is systematic in America, not just present on singular occasions.
This hypocrisy was also pointed out by Martin Luther King, the figurehead for the Civil Rights Movement, in the Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. He reminded the audience that when people of color tried to fight for their rights, their peaceful protests were answered with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. By the nation that claims to embody equality and freedom, which shows America's inability to uphold these promises within its own population.
While it is difficult to face the failures of America, we must be critical of America's supposed exceptionalism. This is important to realize the difference between America's reputation and the treatment of its own citizens.
By ignoring the reality of America and blindly believing in its remarkability, which results in complacency with the way things currently are, we would be complicit in the suppression of America's ability to learn necessary lessons and grow into a better nation that lives up to the ideals it represents.